Okay, happy weekend to you. In this episode of Growing Your Tree of Prosperity, I'm going to talk about this thing that's been running around. Okay, Singapore is once again, rated by some financial institutions as one of the most expensive cities in the world. All right, and previously this week, we've covered a particular survey, and I tried to shed some light on like how we need to think about these surveys and how do we analyze these reports. All right, so now we're gonna go through a same exercise but with a different report. Okay, and according to a Julius Baer uh, Global Lifestyle Report 2025. Singapore is now the most expensive city in the world, okay? And the report captures the situation before the Trump tariffs on April the 2nd. And the ranking is that Singapore came first, followed by London, and then followed by Hong Kong, right? Um, as usual, when these financial institutions they put up their surveys, the immediate question that you want to ask yourself is, what does it mean to a regular Singaporean? Does it even matter, right? Given that we are probably not the kind of clientele that these institutions want, okay? Yeah, and so the fun part is that as you dig into these lifestyle reports, you find that there's a lot to learn from these reports and not necessarily the headline grabbing articles, okay? So let's talk a little bit about how this survey is being done by Julius Baer. What they do is that they have these discretionary consumption categories, and it's really first world problem level kind of category, right? So for wealthy people, they're more concerned about bicycles, which is actually quite hilarious. Okay, a car is obvious. Champagne, okay, jewelry, men's suit, residential property. Okay, residential property makes sense, all right? Otherwise, technology sounds okay until you realize that a large part of the technology tends to be biased towards Apple, right? The designer Apple brand, okay? Treadmills, yeah, that's ridiculous. We have IPPT here. Why do we need treadmills? Okay, watches, women's handbag, women's shoes, business class flights. So you don't even want to put aircraft tickets. It has to be business class flights. Okay, and it's not ordinary dinner. It is not a Cai Peng dinner. It is a degustation dinner. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm not even sure whether I've ever had a degustation dinner in my lifetime. I probably had one, and it's in a friend's wedding. I think that's the closest thing I ever had. Right? Okay. Healthcare hotel suite, LASIK, lawyer. Okay, wealthy people are very litigious. So, legal fees. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad I have a law degree. MBA. Okay, even MBAs are not cool anymore, but it's in that category. And then not ordinary school, but private school. Okay, private school and spas, right? Wealthy people need to have spas, right? Otherwise, life will become too toxic for them. Okay, so if you look at these consumption categories, you should breathe easy because this is certainly not something that most average folks must have. All right, maybe the average Julius Baer customer, but not folks like us. All right, okay. So, but I think it is very valuable because it tells us what it takes to become a high net worth person, right? If you know a little bit of sociology, like I'm a very amateur kind of layman sociologist, right? You know that just having money, just having a high net worth doesn't really qualify you into the ranks of the wealthy in Singapore and anywhere around the world. Adopt you need to adopt their lifestyle. You need to adopt their consumption practices, right? If you don't adopt their consumption practices, you always be not in the club. Okay? Yeah, like me, right? Head to toe in Decathlon, you know, t-shirt refresh at Uniqlo, and I go donkey to get Japanese food because Japanese food is expensive everywhere else, right? I'm not invited to these parties, and they don't want to have anything to do with people like me. Okay, all right, okay. So let's look at some of the significant price increases in Singapore, and this is very valuable, right? And according to the survey, we already have the most expensive cars thanks to COE, okay, and that's not new, okay. But amazingly, women's handbags are also very expensive in Singapore, and I don't know why. Why would women's handbags be more expensive in Singapore than, for example, in London, where there's a value added tax, right? So that's very interesting. Okay, it's a new thing to me. And the reason why Singapore is number one is because three categories have increased in cost. The first is private school has gone up by 12.1%. Oh my God, right? So if you want to study in the Singapore American school, ISS, well, fees have gone up. Hotel suites have gone up. But that's understandable. Hotel suites have gone up because international acts like Taylor Swift, Bruno Mars, when they come here, the price of our hotels go up. And so hotels are very expensive in Singapore. And I think we cannot willy-nilly convert our own living accommodation to Airbnbs. All right, so understood. And business class tickets have gone up by 17%. I'm glad I don't fly business class. Okay. All right. So the good news is that in all these categories, can we can invest. If you are concerned about rising private school prices, you can invest in overseas education, RQ1. If you want to take advantage of more expensive business class flights, then the obvious answer is to buy SIA. And if you want to take advantage of hotel suites going up in price, there is Far East Hospitality Trust. So even for ordinary mortals like us, retail investors, we could have invested some of our funds into these companies to exploit these price increases. Okay, so the report is still useful. It's provided us with some insights on discretionary goods. Okay, and what is valuable is that inflation for these discretionary goods is often double that of the inflation of the economy. So it's good, right? You want rich people to spend more money, right? Otherwise, they'll keep their money for their children, and their children will then be even more wealthier than our children, all right? So you do want their inflation rate to be double that of ordinary mortals, right? Okay. And the material, at least from this report, is that it's simply not pertinent for us, right? But it's very valuable for me because at least I get to understand that the wealthy people in Singapore are a subculture on its own. They have their own culture, they have their own style, and they're very different from us, right? So, like for me, the only way for me to get some sort of indirect contact with them is if my daughter studies in a secondary school. My daughter studies in a mission school, right? So generally the parents are probably wealthier, and some of her classmates are indeed uber rich, right? So you need to make sure that your children are not affected by all this, right? So that's probably the only thing that we need to do, right? Yeah, and I have to explain to my daughter that if you get some bootleg labubu from JB, right? Inflation is probably 2%, but you want the actual labubu from Pop Mart, then you end up paying a bomb for it. Okay, all right. So obviously for the upwardly mobile people listening to me, I think we need to understand that there is a certain cultural reality to the society that we live in, right? And that at a certain level, I think Singapore has a very broad middle class. And we live very comfortable lives because our transportation is good, medical facilities are good, right? But if somehow you are a firmly grasping person and you're always trying to climb and get ahead of other people, right? Then a report like this from Julius Baer is very valuable because it sort of tells you, right? What do you need to qualify? On top of all these things that you need to have, I need to buy an expensive handbag in Singapore that already has the most expensive women's handbag in the world, right? I should also not be myopic, right? Because for some strange reason, LASIK is a category, right? And maybe to fit in, I have to buy a Brompton cycle, for example, right? Yeah, and so I think for me that has a lot of value, right? To understand. So this is a snapshot of what rich people is like in Singapore, and I'm also very happy to know that I absolutely do not qualify because uh, other than the fact that I have a piece of residential property, I, I really own none of the stuff that's actually in this report. I mean, you can comment on whether you agree with me, okay? And I'm in fact deeply entertained by this document. Okay, if you like my content, subscribe to my channel. You can buy me a coffee on the link here. If you want to listen to my life story, I conduct a preview at the link here, and you can Google ERM intro, take the first link, uh, and I'll be talking live, about the early retirement masterclass. All right. So with that, um, we're done for this week, and I'll see you next week for more videos. Thank you very much.